Baldwin with Secure Cyber Defense, and this is your bi-weekly video cyber update. Well, to say there's been a lot going on would be probably the understatement of the year. If you have Microsoft Exchange, most of you certainly know by now what that's all about. So I'm going to provide an Exchange update and then go through some of the other vulnerabilities. So if you have Office 365 and you're not aware of what's been going on, essentially starting on January 5th, I've got a rough outline here in front of me, a timeline courtesy of Brian Krebs. About January 5th, an organization named DevCore basically indicated that they found a vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange that would allow someone to take advantage of 4 flaws in the software to then remote control and then potentially exfiltrate information, so exfiltrate mailboxes. If you're not familiar, Microsoft Exchange is the on-premise version of Office, essentially Office 365. It allows email transfer, interacts with the Outlook client. A lot of customers, back in the day would use the Exchange on-prem, mainly because, well, we all use that, right? Because Office 365 didn't exist yet. So some organizations have had to keep Exchange on-prem, maybe for regulatory or privacy reasons. And then even some organizations that went to Office 365 caught themselves in a situation where they were vulnerable because they were using a Exchange server to do relays up to Office 365. So essentially what happened was the information about this particular vulnerability apparently looks like it was released prior, or hackers found out about it prior to Microsoft actually getting a patch. This is what's called a 0-day. So the time where from the time that a security flaw is identified to the time that they patch it is called 0 days. So that period of time where we don't have a patch, systems can be vulnerable if attackers can reverse engineer or get knowledge of what the vulnerability is, and they can start exploiting it before there's a patch. In this case, it happened on a mass scale. So starting around, what we have documented was around February 24th was the earliest that we saw a attack occurring, all the way until, well, I think attacks are still occurring today. So the main thing that you need to do, there's tons of guidance out there right now. We're getting almost all of the real guidance is coming from CISA, which is the government agency that oversees cybersecurity. It's a division of Homeland. There's tons of guidance. There's tons of indicators of compromise. There's scripts that you can run. If you haven't patched your Exchange server by now, you need to. However, I need to let you know that your Exchange server is likely compromised, and you need to implement your incident response plan. So if you're watching this video and you've got an Exchange server, even though you've patched it, we've seen customers that have already patched it and are still showing signs of compromise. The patch will only close the vulnerability. It won't kick the hackers out of your box. So just keep that in mind. As far as Patch Tuesday, as if it couldn't get any worse, Patch Tuesday happened this past Tuesday. 122 vulnerabilities were detected. There's a fairly nasty RCE, which is a remote control exploit involving DNS. The key takeaway here is if you've not patched your Microsoft environment by now, I know it's Thursday. We're recording this on Thursday. You'll watch this tomorrow. You need to patch your stuff now. And the way things are going, as soon as these patches come out, you need to get them on your boxes. As far as the Exchange vulnerability, I don't think anybody had a chance. Most of these patches, especially the emergency patch came out, we were seeing attacks days, and I was just talking to one of our head of cyber, and he was saying that he was actually reading indications that this was happening 6 months ago. So there was absolutely nothing I think anybody really could have done. I think we're going to put together some documentation to kind of show some after action type things. The only thing that really that we could find that would have potentially saved people is moving to EDR software. There's a specific action that the hackers were taking. It's called LSAS. and it's basically a Windows process that contains passwords. And when there's an LSAS dump, which is very common with hackers, they'll exfiltrate the passwords. That LSAS dump would trigger an EDR software. It's not going to trigger your run-of-the-mill antivirus. So that's about the only thing that we could possibly think of. And even then, there was really no guarantee, right? Because not all of these hacks were the same. A lot of them don't use the same tools. So to say that if you would have done X, Y, and Z, it wouldn't have happened, we can't necessarily say that for this one. As far as Apple and Adobe both also have issued security patches addressing vulnerabilities in their software. The best thing I can tell you is just patch all of your stuff, patch it often, and then make sure that you're running vulnerability scans internally to make sure and validate that your patches have been successfully installed and that you don't have any other weaknesses internally. As far as cyber news, we're still seeing there's been some reports coming out. We just filmed a webinar for Fortinet yesterday called the Next 365, and we'll post it at some point here in the future. It was a great session. We're still seeing at-home devices that are being compromised and aren't being cared for. And a lot of these are IoT devices, so these could be your thermostat for your HVAC system. It could be Alexa. It could be the Google, whatever Google's equivalent is. What is it?
It's just called Google.
The Google.
They don't have
the Google box.
They don't have a name for it.
So that's my son behind the scenes. And Google Home. That's it. Thanks, Google. So we're seeing that a lot of these devices aren't being cared for. So you need to take a look at especially your IoT devices. That could be, heck, it could be your you can go out and buy a refrigerator that's got an IP address. And so all these devices have to be cared for. They have to be kept up to date. And Fortinet had just recently put out on their threat landscape report, which actually we're going to have a separate webinar. Michael's going to get that out here in the next week or two, where we can just discuss some of the threat landscape, basically a roadmap over the next in the future of what we're seeing threat landscape wise. But Fortinet in their document was indicating that there's still today they see just a number of hacking attempts against home grade routers, things like D-Link. Actually, there's the Fortiguard Threat Intelligence Brief. You can actually sign up for this and get this. They publish this weekly. And this is the last report, and the last report showed the number one thing is Netgear. So we can't have this home versus corporate mindset. What we deemed the term, it was work from anywhere, right? It's not work from home anymore. It's now work from anywhere. So we're, as we evolve and we go back to hybrid work, we now have our home office, we have Starbucks, or wherever you're going to work from is where we get work done. So there's a lot of research and a lot of information that has to be pushed out to make sure that we ensure that you are staying safe and that you're able to keep your devices safe no matter where you're at. And as far as the threat landscape preview, which we're going to have a webinar for, there's some great key takeaways in this landscape report. I have to credit Derek Mankey. He was on our panel yesterday from Fortiguard Labs. He did a great job. It's titled "Cyber Adversaries Are Exploiting the Global Pandemic at Enormous Scale." So I'm looking forward to doing this webinar and going over this with you. There's a lot of good information in here that we can take from to just learn, right, and keep our network secure. Term of the week. So Michael and I decided that, actually Michael decided and I agreed, that the topic this week would be botnet. And I learned something today by doing that research. And there's two real popular botnets. First note, what is a botnet? I'm going to read it definition-wise and I'll explain it. So it's a collection of internet-connected devices that are taken over by malware. Attackers create these zombie networks to remain undetected or to further spread their malware. A really good example of a botnet is years ago there was a a botnet where a hacker had taken control of hundreds of thousands of DVRs out on the internet. And they basically enlisted all of these DVRs as zombies. And on a certain day, they unleashed the collectiveness of those hundreds of thousands of DVRs and launched an attack against our DNS system, which is the core system that makes the internet work. And that was a zombie attack. That was a botnet. And there are actually two very, very popular botnets that continually search the internet today in all of your networks. I think the research was 90% of organizations that actually track this are hit by, or attempted to be hit by, these two botnets. So Mirai and GhostRat. There's Ghost and GhostRat. It just enforces the importance of having intrusion prevention services on your gateway facing or your edge facing devices, the internet facing firewall. And it's a very common term that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. I think a lot of people would be very surprised to see, if you look at a firewall and you don't understand what it does or the information that it coughs up. To just look at a firewall, it's a very quiet device, right? That's just a lot of blinky lights, but it really doesn't make much noise. If you actually got into the inside of a firewall and saw in real time the attempted exploits against your network, I think you'd probably lose a couple hours a night of sleep, like I do. So, and then today on Shawn's Soapbox, endpoint security and a sensible backup strategy. Michael was being nice when he wrote that. Basically, I know I've said this before and I just don't know what another way to put it. You have got to get to an EDR platform as soon as you possibly can. EDR is the only thing that's going to take care of today's malware. I believe, it's just in my humble opinion, that a lot of the traditional antivirus is just not able to keep up. So if you haven't moved to an EDR platform and if you don't have offline backups, I've had multiple conversations this week with organizations and they still don't have offline backups. One of them even, he brought up a great point because he said, well, can I still use tape? Absolutely. Tape is still alive. It's not dead. I understand that it's slow, but it's very economical and you can back up an immense amount of compressed data and put it on a tape. And you take that physical tape out and you put it in a safe. So you've got to have some offline backups. All of the ransomware that we've seen up till today takes advantage of all of your backups, your volume, your shadow copies, everything. So just make sure that you can move to an EDR platform and you're promising me that you're going to get an offline copy of your backups and you're going to place it somewhere. It doesn't mean, if you've got 30 terabytes, it doesn't mean you have to go to Micro Center and get 10 3 terabyte drives. I guess if you want to do that, that's fine. But do whatever it takes, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the difference between you having any data about your company and paying a hacker and negotiating with terrorists. And if you've seen some of my previous webinars, you know that there's already 2 federal documents that are out there warning organizations. I believe it was OFAC and FinCEN. If you pay an organization and it turns out that was a nation state or a terrorist organization that we had bad relations with, not that we have good relations with terrorist organizations, but if it comes to find out that you paid them, that there could be ramifications for that. And that's all we have for this week. I'm sorry that it took a little bit longer. There's a lot going on. And I just want to encourage everybody to just stay on top of the news. Push this video out to as many people as you can. Subscribe to our newsletters. Next week is a newsletter week, so we'll have information in there. But what we're also trying to do is maybe on newsletter weeks, we're trying to work in maybe a podcast or a webinar just to make sure that we're giving ample opportunity for question and answer, and we can get the news out to you. As always, I appreciate you guys, and have a great week.